Hi, folks. This is Keith.
This is Andy. Welcome to Brockton Bay.
Welcome again to the Brockton Bay Chronicles. We're back trying to survive in a post-Leviathan Brockton Bay. I'm recording from my neighborhood evac shelter. Meanwhile, Andy is safely ensconced in his underground base. He's reading the exploits of his new hero, Andrew Richter. Andy, what's up for review today? And how go your efforts at finding a backdoor entrance into Dragon's Code?
Well, here in my lair, I fired up my Kali Linux virtual box, and I got my burp proxy running, and I'm trying to adjust request payloads to get past the homepage for the protectorate. But so far, I haven't had any luck with that. Dragon, I think, is way ahead of me on that one.
Well, keep after it. Keep after it. I'm sure you'll come up with some way to get yourself in. What are we doing today?
Well, we'll be reviewing Arc 11, Infestation, chapters 1 through 5. And there is no new business this week, so I think we can jump right into our review.
Sounds good. So let's get started. This week, we're starting Arc 11, chapter 1. And we start off with Taylor having a pretty good nightmare. When I first hit this, as everyone knows, I was listening to the audiobook, and it was the guy who did the reading of this section had me pretty enthralled. I was convinced that this was real, because you got to realize I'm driving to and from work. I couldn't tell you exactly where I was driving around town, and I'm listening to the audio. This freaked me out pretty good. It was pretty convincing. How did you handle it?
Oh, I had the same kind of experience. I mean, I'm reading it in the web browser, but with text, you can't tell. It's not like, sometimes authors will indicate, if it's a dream sequence or something by using italics or whatever. But this looked exactly like every other thing, and I was like, okay, I don't remember Trickster, Ballistic, and Circus being there, but it's not the first time Wildbow has kind of had jumping around and things out of order chronologically. So, and then I'm reading it, I'm like, man, this just sucks. I mean, how did things go so far south so quickly?
Exactly. I found myself wondering, oh my God, how was she going to get herself out of this? What was she doing? What mistake did she go? How could she think she could take on Coil right now? So it was a really convincing piece of writing.
For sure. And then, like you said, when you get to the end of it and Coil is her dad, I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, massive numbers of synapses were exploding in my head.
Exactly. And I've been thinking about it and kind of racking my brain. There's all sorts of psychobabble, if you will, although I believe in psychology for sure. But trying to interpret dreams is, I think, maybe one step up above astrology, but it's just random firings in your brain, and your eyes are doing the REM thing, and maybe you're picking up little glimpses of things. So who knows? But it's kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, Coil is acting as this kind of guide and, support mechanism, and Taylor doesn't really agree with stuff, but is going along with it. I'm like, that's sometimes a parent-kid relationship, and especially how it's strained kind of with her dad. So I could see where her brain would kind of connect those, but I'm thinking, man, is this going somewhere? Or I don't know. It was disturbing though. Yeah, I was messed up until I was like, oh, good, she woke up.
Yes, exactly. She comes to and out of that freakish dream, and she's waking up in her new lair. She's got herself set up in the location that Coil set aside for her HQ, and she takes us on a tour around the premises. She does try to interpret her dreams. You know, she's thinking about what would have set her off, much like you just described, and she figures some of it is the guilt she's feeling about Dinah, and kind of sets her thinking that hey, time is short, and I need to get started on my plan to help get this girl released. So, what did you think about her new abode?
I thought it was a pretty good setup. It's kind of reminiscent of some of those games we played in the past where it's some kind of abandoned area or deserted city, and you have to kind of take over stuff and start. And so you scout around and you say, well, yeah, there's some resources here. Okay, there's nobody encroaching on this area. And so it was kind of neat to see that written up, the stuff that goes through your head in the game actually playing out here, where they've built a little kind of hidden infrastructure, and they've got the layer, as you said, built out enough so that there's plenty of room for expansion.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the kind of I don't know, Blofeld kind of or Dr. Evil, with the different spiders and bugs and
Yeah.
things, and trying to get the special effects. I was like, yeah, I remember being that age and thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I had like
Mm-hmm.
a floor that was a giant aquarium with a magnifying glass built into it, and then all the fish would look like sharks and stuff swimming under my floor, and people would freak out. So I could totally relate to that.
Yeah, she wants to set an image. Let's talk briefly about Coyle's range and his influence, his empire, I guess. We know from previous arcs that he's got a lot of companies underneath his umbrella, I guess. And now we see he's set up these buildings, these small but still pretty well furnished buildings for the Undersiders plus the Travelers to establish their territories around Brockton Bay. So he's got his fingers in a lot of pies around town already.
Yeah, he definitely is kind of that mastermind, wheels within wheels. And so I think one of the earlier arcs talked about him owning this candidate, or setting up this candidate for a fall so that the person he was backing would get control of something. So he's definitely got his fingers in all sorts of pies, and that's one of the surest ways to take control of an area is if there has been a disaster and you control vital resources. You can definitely kind of write your own check at that point. I have one of the guys I work with is down there in Florida, was in the teeth of the hurricane, and
Oh, wow.
he's luckily made it through pretty unscathed, but still, decent amount of damage. And, they're already seeing just huge amounts of price gouging and having to wait months to get people to look at stuff. And it's just, unfortunately, an ugly part of human nature that there are those that'll take advantage of that kind of situation. And so that would totally make sense for a chess master like Coyle to have connections in all those vital resource areas. Like you said, even as far as like underground bunker type building.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't control the people, he at least knew how to get his hands on the blueprints so that he could say, oh yeah, this is a pretty good setup. I'll use that and expand on it.
Yeah. So as Taylor takes us around her place, Wildbow explains to us how she's set up the different levels of her little building there. She's got the top floor. It's three stories. The top story is Taylor's for her personal area, and the second floor is Skitter's. So it makes sense that she would set, not unlike, I guess, the Batcave, where you've got reality on the top floor and you've got the Batcave down underneath Wayne Manor. this was good insight for her to do. Have a place where she can just take the mask off and relax, and then have her area where she works, and she's Skitter, and she's a teenage villain claiming territory.
Yeah, great point, and good analogy with the bat cave and stuff there. You gotta have that place where you can kind of just be yourself. One thing I thought was kind of weird was the whole thing about her contact lenses. I've worn glasses most of my life. I've worn contacts part of the time, and I didn't really see Wildbow giving any good justification for why, in the midst of all this stuff going on, she decides this is the time to wear contacts. Did you find that strange at all, or?
Well, let's see here. Let's advance a little further into the chapter. Looking
Okay.
at when she went out for her run and she talked with her dad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, with what you just said, keeping in mind how she reminded him or informed him about the Slaughterhouse 9 being in the area,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the members of the Slaughterhouse 9 is a cape named Shatterbird.
Okay. Oh, all right.
So something may be driving Taylor's thought that it would be wise to make this change. That's about as
Gotcha.
far as I can say.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I figured there's got to be something justifying this, because then, as you said, before she went out, she had to pry her lenses out of her mask that she had,
Yeah.
caulked in there or whatever. And so it was like, this is making even more work for you. You had something that was good. So, okay, I got you. Don't want to make any spoilers, but I think I see where it's going.
Yeah, so we haven't been given anything specific, but there is enough there to justify that. And hopefully
Gotcha.
hopefully I don't get flamed in the comments as having given you any kind of too much information, but we'll see what the folks think. So Taylor calls up Coyle. She's going to request some men to come help her with a mission she's going to do later in the day. She's not at all upset that Coyle is a little irritated that I guess maybe she's calling during off hours, and she's like, I don't care. I'm going to be doing this for him. So if he's a little put off by my calling at this hour, then tough, You can tell she feels a little dirty with what she's having to have this working relationship with him. But hey, if I inconvenience him at this time, then he'll just have to deal.
It reminded me of those undercover cop shows, where the cop ends up having to do something that he doesn't want to do, or she doesn't want to do for the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
And, really having to deal with that. So yeah, I don't know, maybe this is going to be the whole pattern of it, but she started out saying, I want to be a hero. Here's a good way to get in with the heroes. I'll pretend to be a villain. Oh, I kind of like these villains. Oh, things got really bad, so I don't want to be with the villains. Oh, now the villains and everybody else knows I was double dealing. So now I'm kind of persona non grata. Nobody wants me around.
Yeah.
But then now she has an actual kind of mission, if you will, of saving Dinah. And so she's decided, well, I'll kind of go along with it again, but in a more open way. She told Coyle, this is what I want.
Yeah.
This is my goal. So it's like Captain Crunch, but now it's got crunch berries in it, I guess. I don't know. It's similar, but above board rather than trying to hide it, which didn't work out at all anyway. So
yeah. So after Taylor takes a look around her lair and makes the phone call to Coyle to get some workers to have sent her way, she decides she's going to go for a run in the meantime. And as we alluded to, she gets out on her run and she comes across her father, who is leading a particular cleanup project. This was wholly unexpected from my thinking. I was glad that they ran into each other, but it was awkward, uncomfortable, and as you would expect it to be. Yeah.
Actually, I could have seen it being much more uncomfortable. I tried to put myself in the dad's place, and I would think that, I mean, she had called, she had left messages. He had obviously listened to him over and over again. He stated in the text, but I would have just been, I don't know if I could have worked, even knowing that my kid was still alive after the devastation of Leviathan,
Good point.
but not coming home. I would have been roaming the streets day after day. But
You know
some
what?
people really, oh, go ahead.
You know what? And this leads to an interesting debate. There's discussion online about whether or not Danny was a good dad in that he let Taylor get away with too much early on. You and I have talked about, we discussed the fact that him being a single parent and whether or not he was he waited too long to assert his authority as a parent. This kind of seems to fall along that line of thinking, but I have seen discussions in various places about some people think that he should have been harder with her sooner.
Yeah, that, you and I both being parents, we know what a fine line that is to walk.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to imagine what it would have been like being a single parent after my spouse had died, that would really tilt the scales, I think. I would really be giving my kid the benefit of the doubt and trying to help them in any way I could, because I just can't imagine what that must be like for a kid. And so I don't blame the dad at all for this. It's a choice you have to make, and
Sure.
it's kind of like, yeah, parenting books will tell you that you need to have boundaries with your kids, be tough on them and that kind of thing. But those books, I don't think really that's for kind of the mainstream. They don't take into account these special circumstances where a parent has died, and the dad is trying to be both parents.
Yeah, that's
And
what I was about to say. Yeah. He's trying to fill both sets of shoes.
exactly. And we've touched on it before too. You and I, I'm sure many times, we're ready to go down one path as a parent, and then in talking with our spouse, they're like, hold on a minute, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And without having that sounding board, you end up just kind of trapped in your own head, and you have to kind of debate yourself, and nobody wins in that case usually. So it's a tough spot he's in.
Yeah, it's just one of those interesting things that are out there among the worm community, the debate about whether or not Danny is actually what kind of parent he is. But it's good to read up on and to see what's going on.
That's cool. Another aspect is the whole parahuman thing, right? So as a parent in a normal world like we're in, you know that nobody is going to swoop in and rescue your kid.
Yeah.
That if things go south, that you've got to try to prepare your kid for those things. And part of that is kind of setting those boundaries and walking through different scenarios with them, like, what are you going to do if the bus doesn't show up to bring you back or whatever? Here's your cell phone. It's only for emergency uses, that kind of thing. We all have gone through that. So I wonder how much, even as a subconscious thing, being in a world of parahumans, heroes that can rescue kids, there's this thing of, well, maybe I don't have to feel like I'm the only chance this kid has. There are other people that could, and not like you rely on it, but just that it's there. So I don't know how much that would enter into the psyche of parenting in Brockton Bay. Anyway.
Interesting. So I was happy that they had a chance to talk. I was equally unhappy that it was built upon a layer of more lies from Taylor. I'm living on the outside of town. I'm just out here for my run, just to go see how our house was, and just it was just painful. Although, I mean, obviously she's a villain now, full time, and there's no way she could come clean to him. It just um I just felt a little more heartbroken for it. That's all.
I could totally see that. Yeah, it's I think we've all been through that to a certain extent. We get to, I mean, Taylor's not technically an adult, but she's basically living as a young adult.
Yeah.
And, when we get to that stage of our lives, we're trying out different things. We're successful at some, we're not very successful at other things. And sometimes our parents say, "How's it going? Really, I want to know how things are going." And something bad just happened, and you're like, I'm gonna just gloss over that right now and just
Yeah.
give the Disney version of that story, and then moving right on. So, but yeah, it's just amped up even more with all the stuff going on in Brockton Bay. So
Yeah, the town's messed up. She's being a villain full time, and she's working for a mega super villain who's got dreams of taking over the town. So it's not like there could be a lot of truth or openness in their discussion, at least not from her part. So
right,
she cuts off her run and heads back to her lair, not having run nearly as much as she wanted to. And in the meantime, as you said earlier, she modifies her costume to remove the glass lenses that are in there, because she's going to be wearing her contacts now. Coil's guys arrive, and as we move on into chapter 2, Skitter makes her play to claim her territory. How did you like this as a tactic? What was your thoughts? She was definitely using a lot of theater in this, but I guess I guess I can't blame her for the theatrics, given that she's what, a buck 15 soaking wet, skinny teenage girl trying to claim she's in charge of this new territory. So using her power in the manner that she did, I guess makes sense. What do you think?
yeah, I thought it was pretty ingenious. Like you said, she's not one of the amped up superheroes that can bust through walls and or have lasers shoot out of her eyes or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's no obvious menace or threat that she poses.
Not physically, yeah.
Exactly. And I really liked how she just drove all around town, kind of, or her territory, gathered up the bugs, and then also tried to determine how many people were out there and
Mm-hmm.
track people that way. And it's I mean, we've seen her continue to kind of improve on her skills, her tactics and strategy throughout the story so far. And this seems like another level where it's rather than trying to think about, okay, I've got this battle now I'm going into. Now it's more like, well, there's going to be probably multiple battles,
Mm-hmm.
and so I need to assess the whole battlefield, the terrain. I need to plan out for how I can try to proactively address things. And I
Organizing
thought
things in her mental utility kit.
exactly, yeah, and not just for today, not just for this mission, but kind of like we saw when she wanted hand to hand training. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, this came up, it might come up again. And so she's thinking, all right, I should, even like with her interactions with the with Coil's henchmen, should I pal around with them? Probably not. I'll separate myself, and but then at the end, she comes back and says, "Tell Coil, I think y'all did a good job." And so
Yes.
she's building that relationship in more of a, like, almost a military type situation.
Mm-hmm.
There's clear hierarchy, but I'm acknowledging you did a good job, and so you're going to feel good, and that'll be good for the whole army or whatever you want to call it.
Sure. So this was a good scene that Wildbow set up here. These these people who are beat down, living in the squalor. I mean, Brockton Bay has just gone through this massive ordeal. These people are displaced, many of whom having lost everything, and then they see this villain come and claim the area that they're living in. And Skitter does a good job setting out the message to the people who would be a threat, at the same time eventually not winning over, I can't say that, but connecting enough with the people to where they felt comfortable coming and accepting her gift of supplies.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard. You've got people, like you said, who've been very beat down, feeling pretty hopeless. As we'll see it a little bit later, they've had probably situations where they went one place, things looked a little bit better for a while, then something happened, they had to move again, or something else got disrupted, or electricity died in that area, whatever. They had to move again, people got sick, that kind of thing. And so it's a really hopeless situation for them, and they're probably pretty reluctant to think that anybody's going to help them at this point.
Yeah.
So Skitter does a great job of extending that olive branch, not, hey, I'm not the Red Cross, I'm not going to just give and not expect anything, but not being, it could have been something like some of those movies you see where the gang takes over the whole apartment building and everybody that's in there has to pay them. Everybody
Right.
that's in there has to do their bidding, kind of like the ABB was for a while, where, all right, you've all got a bomb in your head, so you all have to do what I want.
Yeah.
So it could have been very heavy handed, and she didn't go that route at all, which we wouldn't expect from her, but it's cool the way she kind of walked that fine line. The other thing that was kind of cool, I thought, was the way Wildbow described that the environmental conditions, the wreckage and the water and everything, actually really helped Skitter with her minions, if you will.
Yeah.
There was a lot bigger population to draw on.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot more resources for her to work with. And if I'm not mistaken, at one point when she had the truck driving around the perimeter of her territory, as she was gathering her swarm, she wondered if she'd see the upper limit of her ability to control, like if she'd hit a ceiling on her ability to control bugs, and she didn't seem to hit one.
No, yeah, that's especially when he mentioned that the swarm had got big enough that it was actually looking like a cloud. It was actually casting a big old shadow on the ground.
Right?
I was like, that's creepy.
Yeah, that definitely gets your attention. So as she makes her speech to her subjects, didn't really care for that word, but hey, that's what Skitter's going with. As she's making her speech to her subjects, one of these fool members of the merchants decides to make his drug crazed self known. He was part of a group of dirty, grungy looking people, and she took him on. What did you think, as we're moving further into chapter 2, what did you think of her when she fought him hand to hand, and she took a couple of those stabs and knife swings from him? I mean, I know her costume wasn't going to allow him to the knife to penetrate, but still, I mean, it's a pretty sharp blow from a man that had to outweigh. I mean, that had to hurt. I didn't think she had to stand there and take a stab from him like that.
I can see where you're coming from on that. I guess the way I looked at it was, and maybe I read too much into it, but the idea that you assess your possible opponents. I've seen this in other stories. I'm not sure, none come to mind at the moment, but you pick the one that you're pretty sure is not the best one, so that you're not overly endangering herself. So I think at one point it describes that he was very awkward. He used a two-hand stab with a knife or something, and so
Yeah.
maybe she kind of figured out that this would be a good demonstration without it would look good, but it wouldn't actually be that dangerous for her. So that's the way I kind of interpreted it, and I thought it would be much more effective, but it could be that the people are just in such a hopeless state that it's kind of like, oh well, I've seen other people survive miraculously.
Hmm.
Not everybody died, so I'm still here. Wow, okay, she didn't die.
Yeah.
So it's a good demonstration.
I was about to say, yeah, it ended up being a very effective display. We get to see that her hand to hand combat skills are still getting better, and she, even though he is drugged up and messed up mentally, incoherent, he makes a serious physical threat at her, and she handles it. In addition to bringing the swarm down on top of them, the hero Battery happened to be there. She was drawn to the area by the gathering swarm, and she had been talking into her earbud, reporting on the situation as Skitter was making her claim. And once Skitter knocked the knife away from the guy, she and picked it up. Battery stepped forward and was like, "Hey, I can't let you use that." Yeah, that's what it says right here. Is I can't let you use that. She gestured toward the knife. There was a faint glow from her costume. I gathered she was charging up her power. Wasn't planning on it, I lied. Swarm buzzing in sync with my words. So Battery wasn't going to let her assault the guy with the knife. And Skitter was much less certain about whether or not she was going to. I think later on it said she had planned or had debated stabbing him in the hand or some such. So Skitter was upping her game, her violence game.
Well, and that's so it's kind of like in a magic trick, right? Somebody has something done to them, and the assumption is, oh well, that was a fake sword or that was a fake saw or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would think the actual stabbing with the knife would show this isn't a fake knife that he was using. This wasn't all
Gotcha.
just a drama. This wasn't a play over here. This was for real. So I didn't see it as like overly violent, just kind of the finale of the little scene that played
Mm-hmm.
out here. But it was weird, and maybe that's what Wildbow is getting at, that Skitter picks up on, that people don't seem as intimidated after Battery kind of steps in and Skitter has to drop the knife and they talk and Battery leaves. Then she's like, oh, I guess people aren't really that impressed now. What happened?
Yeah, she wondered if Battery letting her stay kind of conveyed some, I don't know, not authority, certainly not, but
Measure of legitimacy is
thank
the way
you.
Wildbow phrases it. Yeah, and maybe that was it. Yeah, that people were like, oh well, she can't be. Skitter can't be that bad. The people might think, because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise Battery would have taken her out. So
Right. Now, Battery does allude to she's going to follow the rules right now. She says word hadn't formally gotten down to take down the Undersiders on site, and so hey, I'm not gonna do anything to stop you here. But once the formal memo comes out, we're coming for you guys. And
mm,
Skitter's like, hey, I would expect nothing less.
yeah, and that's kind of the whole play, I think, from Coil, is that while there's all this chaos, I'll try to establish little beachheads of normalcy, or try to get folks on my side, so to speak, claim territory.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they alluded to it in the first chapter, where the building that Skitter is in is nothing special on the outside. And once the rebuilding happens, it'll just blend in with everything else. So if everybody's on her side by then, or at least in some kind of alliance with her, and the neighborhood looks all normal, then the protectorate won't even really know where to look. They'll kind of have the general idea, but no, everybody will kind of have Skitter's back, and it'll be they're laying the groundwork now during the chaos, and then once things are better, they'll be hidden.
Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember if this was brought up by either Coyle or Skitter in her narration, that the Leviathan's arrival really does accelerate play into Coyle's hands, as far as you just said, the chaos providing an opportunity for him to establish, as you said, small beachheads around Brockton Bay. Was that ever discussed?
I think Coyle did mention that. Yeah.
Okay.
That when he was saying, I'm going to set you all up in these different areas.
Okay.
Because when you're trying to overthrow the government, basically is what he's shooting for.
Yeah.
Having a natural disaster like an earthquake or something makes that much easier, because, everything's disrupted. And so, stealing a little bit from this warehouse, or redirecting a little bit of money here, or, you could get away with so much stuff. I mean, we kind of saw that a little bit during the pandemic, right? There was nobody on the streets. And so tons of people took their hot rods out in the middle of the night and just drove as fast as they could. Speeding was way up apparently during the pandemic. Another thing is that, when you're in a nice neighborhood like where you live, there's the homeowners association, and there are different regulations as to whether you can build this or that, or city ordinances and stuff. But a bunch of those people took early retirement. Nobody really wants to go into that line of work anymore, and so lots of people have built little mother-in-law cabin in the backyard or whatever, or built this or done that, and there's nobody there to people call in and say, hey, this is above the fence or whatever. It's like, yeah, well, we only have one person working the whole county now. They'll get out there in 2024.
Yeah.
So when you have a disruptive event like that, then if you're wanting to make changes, it's a good time to try to kind of fly under the radar and get them done.
Yeah, he's stepping in. He's taking advantage of the situation. So as we're moving further in the chapter and heading toward the end, Skitter realizes that there's not going to be enough supplies to go around. She makes a commitment to those who were left without supplies that they would get them later in the day. And she gets approached by a very distressed young lady who has a favor to ask of her. What you think of that?
Yeah, I was really anticipating that things might get kind of ugly, or there might be some more disruption because of the shortage or because of the lack, that might be the focus of it. But this girl coming up was an interesting twist, and it does make sense. It's one of those things where, to go back to Skitter talking about people being her subjects, in addition to the benevolence of the ruler giving out things to the subjects or whatever, there was always that scene where people would, there was that one day of the month or whatever where people could come to the throne room and beg a boon or a favor of the king or queen. And it almost has that kind of flavor to it for me. So it definitely fits in. Skitter's established that, hey, I'm going to try to take care of folks here, and somebody says, hey, I really need some help. So I thought it was a good flow.
Yeah, good setup. This young lady's been to the cops. She was going to talk to Battery, but Battery bolted, and she's desperate. Her kid brother is missing. It's with the merchant. The merchants took her kid brother, as we're told. And hey, please help me get him back. And that moves us on into chapter 3. How did you like the construction of this chapter? The overview, we get Skitter dealing with the first group of merchants. Then she talks with this young lady named Sierra, and then it breaks off to her dealing with the second group of merchants. Did you? So it's not really it's not like we're getting a flashback or anything specific, but it's Wildbow constructed it a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's definitely not linear. You're not just proceeding to, oh well, let's try to find the kid or whatever. But I liked it. It was reminiscent of me of kind of the evil genius in his lair in a James Bond movie.
Definitely.
You have the close up of the spoon stirring the cup, and then pulling back, and you see the person just sitting there, kind of sipping on something, and then in the Bond movies, it would normally show the different screens of what was going on, and that this was being taken care of.
Sure.
This aspect of the plan was moving forward, and so we have the benefit because of Skitter's power with the bugs that it's not on screen. She's actually kind of like plugged into what's going on. So we get not exactly a firsthand thing because she tries to hear what the bugs hear and her brain can't interpret it, but it's still pretty cool the way he did this, and unexpected, but I liked it.
So we get during the course of this, as she's dealing with these druggies, we get good visuals of her using her power, using her swarm clones, setting them on top of these guys. I mean, they asked for it. we're not gonna have any sympathy for them, but it was pretty good descriptive stuff that Wildbow set down on how she was using her swarm clones, and in the second group of merchants, the march of the tiny lit beetles carrying the torches, as it were.
Right. Yeah, the townspeople coming up the hill with their pitchforks and torches, except they're little tiny bugs carrying matches. But
yeah, multi-legged Lilliputians, so to speak.
There you go. Yeah, that was a neat visual. I like this. The one thing I thought was a little bit of a twist, or I expected it to go a little different, was when she had the one group surrounded and they tried different strategies. None of them worked. And then one person was just kind of there, racking their brain what to do. And she let him run.
Right.
And I figured that she would just let him run all the way back to headquarters and say, we need to stay away from here. Usually
so did I.
And so then it was weird that she was like, oh yeah, you're free to go. Psych. Wait a minute, that way's blocked, and then she dropped the bomb on him too. So
does that speak to her character at this point, the darkness? Because or would have been more of a standard trope if Wildbow had written it would have been expected that she let him go. Was it more entertaining that in the end she did drop the bomb on the bug bomb on top of his head versus the traditional, okay, I'm going to give him a way out and let him carry his message of terror back to his boss?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I'm thinking that maybe we just don't have, there aren't enough chapters and arcs that Wildbow could have written to give us the full kind of strategic picture here. But generally, the idea of letting one person run back is that there is like a dominant central authority and a kind of a structure. And Wildbow hints that the merchants are more of, a bunch of desperate people who were totally normal before Leviathan, just deciding, well, all bets are off now and I can't get anything any other way, so I might as well just give up and run with these knuckleheads. And so maybe Wildbow and Skitter's thinking is that there is no central authority for this last thug to run back to and warn. It's just too much of a big mob, really, and that there wouldn't be any benefit to that there'd be more benefit just to a general fear that a bunch of people went and none of them came back.
Right. Because several times throughout this, Skitter has repeatedly said it was about sending a message to her enemies.
Yeah. So the idea is what is the better message, I
Yeah.
guess? Is it just that there's a total unknown of what happened and that creates more fear on a mob mentality, or to have somebody take back a message to who knows who, and who knows if it gets bumped up the chain of command, because is there really a chain of command?
Right. Right.
So I don't know, maybe that's it.
No, I see. I see. Part two of these three parts is where we hear from Sierra, the young lady that Skitter spoke with, and she tells this very tragic but probably typical situation of what happened to her family. Everything was perfectly normal, everything was cool, and then this monster comes, wipes out their home, and this tragic story about how her mom and dad took ill, and she was supposed to take care of her brother, and things happen, and now she's reaching out to a supervillain for help.
Huh. I think you're right in that it probably is very typical. And if not for somebody leaving to run with a gang, just everybody else in the family dying, or
Mm-hmm.
the whole family trying to walk out of the city and dying in the wilderness somewhere, trying to get somewhere with no money and no car. And so I'm guessing there's lots of tragedies like this, as you said. And this girl is just, I think, like I said, even though she knows that Skitter is a villain, she seems somewhat benevolent. You know, she's giving out food, she's trying to get rid of the worst villains. So you pick the lesser of the evils kind of thing, and
Yeah, and
maybe she'll help.
desperation.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
desperation drove her to this, and yeah, very much so. I do like at the end of the description of her attack on the second group of merchants. It says, "I went to the kitchen before sending a text to Coyle. Merchant burn victim and other wounded near Sandstone and Henry. Send medic? Question mark. Help them or don't. I don't care. Do you want to send a medic? Do you know this guy might this lady with the burnt pants? Yeah, send someone to help her out. I don't want her to die necessarily, I guess. But so after agreeing to help Sierra, she calls up Lisa and says, "Hey, explains. Hey, I got a favor to ask." And the two of them decide to move to meet up. So she, as we're moving into chapter 4, she heads on over to Tattletale's HQ. Tattletale's got a very cool setup. Exactly, I guess how you would expect an information savant to cope to deal. She's operating out of a shelter, which is a good front, and she's not set herself up as the boss of that shelter. She's posing as one of the workers. Meanwhile, she's got a CIA black ops office back behind the scenes.
it was pretty brilliant, and you'd expect nothing less of Tattletale,
right?
Trying to look at all the different angles, and as was discussed in her interlude, figuring out how best to use her power. And the best way is to kind of be that fly on the wall, just appear like you're one of the pieces of furniture, and people will talk in front of you. You hear all the scoops. Nobody will be, oh, I don't want to talk to that person. They're the boss. They might kick me out or whatever. And so, yeah, it's pretty great setup for her particular skill set.
And she's just information's coming to her, as you said, and she's absorbing it, filing it, and putting it into different useful bins for her to retrieve at a later point. Taylor gets there, and the two girls talk, and we do get some more of the kind of interpersonal relationship interactions that I like in this story. Where at one point, I might be skipping ahead a little bit, where the two girls talk about how Taylor had confessed her feelings to Gru, or to Brian. And I do like this nice demonstration of friendship between these two. So even though Lisa didn't get a chance to fully commiserate with Taylor. You could tell from that brief little oh honey, I believe it was the phrase she used. She was going to launch into being a very supportive friend and try to talk to her about her feelings and the situation as it had evolved.
Yeah, this is one of those nice things, and I really liked it when the whole band was together, so to speak, and they all played off each other. And so it's still a little bit sad that that's disrupted, but it's nice to see that this element remains, this friendship between the two of them. And I think Tattletale is more kind of being the I got your back kind of thing.
Yeah.
She says, I'm going to kick his bleep for being that. And she's like, hold on a minute. That's not what I was looking for here. I appreciate you being, ready to go to the mat, but things are bad enough as it is. That's the last thing we need. So one thing I would like to touch on, though, I don't know if it was at this point or a little bit later in the chapter, but Tattletale actually does mention that she's feeling a little overloaded, and it kind of is reminiscent. Taylor's got her bugs, Lisa's got her people, and I guess because maybe the information is more easily digestible, she's feeling more like she's under a giant deluge of information and feeling like it's too much, whereas Taylor's able to say, I can't even understand what that bug's here, and so I'm not even going to bother to process it.
Oh, I see. Being able to shut it off versus it just comes in to Lisa and she can't shut it off, kind of thing. Am I interpreting what you're saying?
That's an element of it, but also that Lisa doesn't want to shut it off. She can process it all. She doesn't want to miss anything.
Okay.
And so she's trying to let it all come through, and it's getting too much. She, I think, mentions that she's starting to feel like a headache coming on, and how she feels when she
overuses her power.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was interesting, kind of comparison of how the two are feeling overloaded or not overloaded yet.
Cool. So as the two girls are talking, Lisa has called in several of her workers, her soldiers, Minor, Senegal, Brooks, and Jaw, and they're all ex-military. They're all Coil soldiers who are now working for Tattletale, and they are going to be their escorts to this merchant festival. Yeah, as we go further into the chapter, moving on into chapter 5, we find out just what kind of disgusting gathering this is. But these guys are all ex-military. They've got specific skill sets. They all look intimidating, even though I guess Brooks is kind of shortish, but he still looks like he's in physical shape. The guy that Lisa pairs up with, Taylor, kind of makes your skin crawl a little bit. And as they're walking toward the festival, Lisa talks about having to deal with some of these personnel issues, in particular, Brooks and Senegal.
And, that's a little bit of a trope. It's kind of a common thing with anytime you've got the mercenaries, if you will. They're the ones who left the, formal regimented military ranks for whatever reason. So you get, the fair share of the cringy ones. And so it's not surprising. And, it seems like Brooks definitely has the short guy chip on his shoulder syndrome. So, but that's fine. I mean, Wildbow can't have everything be unexpected. Some of it's got to be, oh yeah, okay, I know what this situation is. I got it. This resonates. I've been here. So these people are just kind of window dressing. They're along to complete the picture. So that's totally fine, and it doesn't take away anything from the story, I don't think.
No, not at all. And it's cool to see that that Tattletale's trying to build a rapport with Minor, who's the team captain, and she recognizes, probably doesn't even need her power to recognize how things are between Brooks and Senegal. There are a couple of loose cannons, and she's going to have to formulate a way to deal with them. And it was cool that how on their walk to the mall where the merchants are gathering, how Lisa is sharing all the pitfalls of having human minions as opposed to the bug kind. So they get to the mall, and this is just some kind of depraved Mad Max-esque kind of situation.
Thunderdome, that's a great visual for this. Yeah, it's really messed up. And to hark back to earlier where they were talking about all the bugs and all the breeding ground for stuff, it's just I can't imagine what that place must have been like. I don't know that I could have gone in there at all. Not that I'm a queasy type person, but I do have my limits. I don't know if you remember, but when I first moved back and we roomed together for a while, I had visited back to Seattle, and the person I stayed with, one of her kids had got lice at school. And so I freaked out. I was like, why didn't you tell me this before I came and stayed at your house? This is not cool. And she's like, I shaved his head. We've done the thing. But I went and I bought all the paraphernalia at the store, and I was checking myself regularly. And then I got back to Arizona, and you remember the apartment we were in had all these trees that were not well kept. They were hanging over everywhere. And I guess I walked underneath one of those and got one of those little white flies in my hair.
Oh, man.
And then when I combed my hair that night, I was like, oh, crap, I got the lice. And I was ready to shave my head right there, man. I was so freaked out by it. So, I can't even imagine going into the mall. I would have been like, you know what? I'm sorry. I can't find your brother.
Yeah, I tried. I stood there, I looked, and he didn't hold his hand up. So that was right. It, exactly.
Yeah, he wasn't waiting at the bus stop, so I just drove home.
I mean, but just think about Skitter. I mean, she can.
That's a good point.
She knows where these creatures are on these people, and I think it said where she could tell how many had lice, and that half of them were gonna we're gonna be getting them, and so it was just because that's what her power was telling her on these dirty, grungy, nasty people.
Oh man, that's nasty, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So Tattletale has figured out what these armbands are for. They're handing out armbands at the entrance, and the ones that they're giving out at the entrance tonight are red. And the girls say Lisa had noticed it too. Yellow bands were for a test of courage. Black were for a near-death experience. The red ones they're handing out at the door, blood, I guessed. Bloodshed, yeah. Something ugly is going to happen tonight. And that moves us on into chapter 5. The search for Bryce commences. And when they first get in there, Lisa buys some ecstasy for the girls and one of the guys, and uses some sleight of hand to swap them out with some sugar pills just to help them blend in with the rest of these merchants.
Yeah, that definitely looked like Tattletale using her power there.
Yeah.
Where, it's like she was realizing that it was off, that they weren't. I'm sure they looked well. I know they looked better than the vast majority of the people there, so they seem like they're doing okay. They should have some cash, and they're not really participating. So it
would have raised an eyebrow.
Yeah, it's the guy with the mirror sunglasses and the tucked in shirt showing up to the biker rally, and everybody's like, narc. So they're trying, she sees this, and uses her power, I'm guessing, saying, no, we got to blend in. And but yeah, it's neat that she's able to use the sleight of hand.
My guess is that her power probably told her even before they got there that having something like this would be good, the extra cash and the sugar pills going into a den of drug users would have been good for her to have.
Definitely. Yeah, I bet you're right.
So they run into, among all this debauchery, is a display of women scantily clad, putting on and taking off clothes for a crowd of jeering individuals. And one of the women up there actually is a young girl, and she's not having any of it. She's scared, and clearly so. And Taylor tells Lisa, we need to help this girl. To which Lisa retorts, look, there's a bunch of people here who need help, and we can't help them all. And Taylor's like, look, I'm going to help her whether you want me to or not, because I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. And Lisa retorts something that I thought was truthful but telling. And it's, quote, you've got a little superhero showing through there, end quote. Just kind of a, hey, are you with us or not kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess I interpreted that a little differently. I don't think Taylor shared with anybody what her deal with Coyle is, but they all know how upset she was about Dinah and the rift that it caused. And so they know she's kind of a protector type or a guardian type, if you will,
Okay.
somebody who wants to be the paladin, to be the knight in shining armor. And so I think it's more that, hey, there you go again,
Mm-hmm.
I think I've shared with you before, but back in my D&D days, I always played a goody goody. That's just how I am. And one time my friend kind of challenged me and said, you should play an evil character one time. And so the character's name was Dark Steeple, but because the way I played it over and over, I kept having to do alignment saving rolls, and I eventually ended up being White Steeple because I just couldn't do it. I couldn't be evil all the time. And so I think Taylor's definitely got that. And I think seeing somebody in distress like this makes her think of that guilt she has about Dinah and wanting to rescue her and not being able to do anything about it instantly. And it's like, well, here's something I can do instantly. She's even willing to use her powers in the midst of this, it'd be a horrible idea, but
yeah,
in the midst of this, villainous crowd, luckily she doesn't have to do that.
Lisa acquiesces and says, hey, no, you don't have to go that far. And she ends up sending Minor up to the stage to rescue this poor, terrified girl. And that leads us on to a very expected path. So after they gather this girl up and they find some relative privacy in this one section of the mall, as this girl goes to thank them for rescuing her, she recognizes Taylor. Didn't see that coming, did you?
Oh my gosh, that was totally out of left field. No, I did not see that coming at all. That's kind of the worst fear of a villain or a superhero, when they're out of costume, that somebody will recognize them.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're like Bruce Wayne and they're trying to just be bigger than life and totally throw people off that way. But yeah, she sees her, and then the reaction was kind of weird, but I could, in hindsight, I can see it. It's like, all right, I went into the lion's den, I pulled you out when I totally didn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Now you recognize me, I was in even a worse situation possibly, and you did nothing.
Yeah, Taylor laid into her.
Yeah, for sure.
But I guess it's to be expected, because Taylor's situation was so traumatic. She triggered behind it. So she's still got PTSD, I would imagine, to a certain extent. And to have this girl unwittingly throw this all up in her face because of her surprise. It's like, oh my God, you're the locker girl, and not realizing, it ends up being a massive faux pas. But yeah, and then that triggered Taylor. Yeah, you were there, but you didn't help. You didn't call for anybody to let me out.
Yeah, that's not everybody's cut out to be a hero, and especially at that age with peer pressure, it can be real easy to just cave and not do things and not step up. But yeah, to be the person that then does go out of your way to try to save somebody in a horrible situation, and then like you said, have it thrown up in your face, that, oh, that was what I was known as, locker girl.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, yeah, screw you then. You go back into the window with the mannequins. Thanks for playing.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. But the girl realizes how wrong she was to let her shock show through, and essentially begs for forgiveness. Oh, I'm sorry. Please don't leave me here. I I'm scared to death. They'll do bad things to me. Please take me with you. As this is going on, one of one of Lisa's guys comes back and says, "Hey, we just found the guy you're looking for." Taylor decides to let this girl come along with, and they're going to continue with their rescue of her as they go find Bryce. Lisa's guy Jaw is standing there near Bryce and keeping him from getting away, and they have a nice discussion with him. Turns out that Lisa really, as one would expect, knew how to push his buttons.
Yeah, that and they get to the bottom of it pretty quickly, and it turns out that he didn't like the situation, and instead of trying to make it better, just bailed basically when he saw an opening.
Yeah, Zamir just sounds kind of spoiled. I mean, life was pretty good for old Bryce before Leviathan came, and he couldn't hack.
Definitely, yeah, and I that's how things are here in America. As much as some people don't really want to look at it, we have great privilege compared to 90% of the world. So when people aren't used to having to do hard work or do any work really, then when things go south, it gets back to the parenting, I think, a little bit. You and I both were raised, even though we were in decent situations, that you still got to work hard.
Sure.
You got to do what you're told to do. You got to do what's right. And not everybody got that much. You got families with both parents working a lot of hours, and the kids, latchkey kids or having a nanny or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of that stuff goes by the wayside. And then when things go south, then they're not prepared for that. And they're just like, yeah, this is horrible. I don't want to deal with this. I'll go do something else. I'll be a criminal. Yeah, he sounded very spoiled.
Yeah. So Lisa plays on his fear, tells him that his sister is in an ICU. Taylor goes along with it and lets that sit in this kid's mind. And as she's laying this story out to Bryce, Skidmark takes the stage. This whole scenario is just kind of an ugly thing. So Lisa looks at the situation, sees that there are a few more parahumans standing behind Skidmark than she knew to be in his cadre before. She intuits, her power tells her that he's trying to get people to have trigger events. That's how he's recruiting parahumans, she says. And that's what he's doing. He uses his power to make a ring and to put people inside that ring. And these people, he says, are going to fight, and we'll see who comes out on top.
That's pretty twisted. And it's interesting that there weren't more people that knew this was coming, I guess. But Lisa had kind of implied that there were plenty of people that were camp followers, if you will, not really merchants, but just hangers on. They're the ones that end up getting kind of sucked into this ring by Skidmark's power, and you can tell they don't want to be in there. And those seem like the ones that would be most likely to be triggered. If somebody's already kind of a psycho, then they don't care if they're fighting to the death. It's just, hey, more fighting, great, whatever. But these people who are very reluctant seem like they have a good chance. And then there's a whole nother twist to it, which is even more disturbing.
Yeah, the superpowers in a can thing.
Prize, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so it sounds like that they've had these kind of events before, and that they've been raiding all sorts of mansions or any place they can get into to try to get great stuff to give away as prizes. But somehow they got hold of these, superpowers in a can. So that's when the wheels start turning in my head. It's like, well, how would they have got those? anybody that had that would have gotten out of there with them. So did somebody working this to try to get them to them, or it's really hard to. Wildbow's got me all twisted up on this. I'm not sure where this is going.
Yeah, that's a good question. How does capes at the lower end of the social ladder, how could they come up with these? And do you think he's telling the truth, or is he just talking out the side of his neck, so to speak?
I hadn't even thought of that. That's an interesting twist, but that could definitely be it. If people are going to trigger anyway, then he could, give them the prize while they're kind of in the midst of the trigger, and then claim that, the bath water that he gave them actually, look, they're parahuman now, and then that, increases the excitement about the next event or whatever, or draws more people to it. I hadn't thought about it that way. That seems much more likely than him actually having his hands on this stuff, because why wouldn't he just give it to his lieutenants and stuff then, or the loyal people? Why would he just give them to some randos that happen to duke it out and win? I guess that'd be a way to find the most ruthless people, but then you're risking that they would be more powerful than you. I don't know. Of course, he's not a brain trust, right?
He's not going to head up Mensa or anything like that anytime soon. So, we will see what happens and where things go with this merchant festival of mayhem in our next episode. So that brings us to the end of chapter 5, and that also brings us to the end of this episode. As we had said earlier, this is part 1 of 3, and we hope that you'll join us next time. We certainly thank you for being here, and stand by for our parts 2 and 3 and our review of Arc 11. So until next time, take care.
And just so you know, no matter how grungy or cringy it gets with these merchants, we'll keep reading and we'll keep talking about it. I'll get past my own phobias about bugs and stuff, and we'll just keep pushing through. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us in this video. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more information in the link down below. Catch you later.